Right, so I have already done the introduction, so I'll just go over to the next slide. And really today what we're going to be talking about is the COGA, but what I wanted to do first of all was just talk you through the grants kind of approval process, so that you can get a bit of an understanding of the approach that we take once we receive the final decisions, and how that will impact you, and just a bit about the timescales as well. So once an application has been recommended at the ward selection meeting, so that's when you have been to the ward selection meeting to present your project, the participants make a recommendation, and then what happens is that goes to the final senior panel, and that's an internal panel where they review the recommendations and they approve them, and that usually takes, I'd say, between a week or 2 weeks to go to the panel from when the meeting takes place, and then once the approval has taken place, what then happens is it comes over to myself and my colleagues, who are the community support and development officers, and we're asked to progress them, and we do that based on the wards that we cover. So Pat does Ladywood constituency. We've also got Rachel, Mal, Claire, Hardwick, and John Mole and myself. So there's 6 of us that are doing the kind of processing the approval. So you'll get information from, I'd say, one of us at least, over the next few weeks. So it comes to us to progress, and what we do is we set up the conditions of grant aid, and we try to do this within 10 working days of when we receive the final approval, and what we do is that we'll send that to you by email, and we'll also send you a new supplier form. And the new supplier form is, at the moment we're sending it to all groups, but if you are somebody that has received funding from the NDSU or Birmingham City Council in the last 12 months, you won't need to fill that in, but if you are somebody that's new to us, then you would need to complete that. We'll talk a bit more about that in throughout the session today, and then once we've received the COGA and all the supporting information back, then we aim to release the payment within 20 working days. So what I'm going to do is just pass you over to Pat, and she's just going to talk a bit about what is a COGA, and just a bit of background around them.
Carla, good evening everyone. I'm sorry my camera's not on. I'm actually using a big monitor, so if I have my little 13-inch laptop on, I can't see anything, so I'm actually talking to you on a monitor. Some of you I do know. I can see that within the last 48 hours there are a couple of organizations that's on the call that I would have sent a COGA to in the from Friday to last evening. So welcome and thank you for taking part in the session. Yes, as Carla says, the conditions are granted. It's a mouthful actually, but it's a contract between yourself and ourselves as NDSU, and also on behalf of Birmingham City Council. There are 2 types of conditions are granted that we use within the Neighbourhood and Development Support Unit. Had we sent you the one that is used generically, it would be a 26-page. Well, it used to be a 26-page condition granted. So we've whittled it down to about 6 or 7 pages now. As I said, there are 2 types of conditions are granted, one for under 2,000, and then the one that most of you would have received from me in the last 24, 48 hours would have been more pages, probably about 6 pages, which would be a 2,000 to 10,000. I think I've got Alison. Are you on the call, Alison, from Patchwork Meadows? Did I see you there? Yeah. So Alison will have received the conditions are granted for under 2K because of the funding that was supported by her ward. Right. As Carla says, the payments are scheduled, and I think you can see on the display what we would try and fill in as much as we can, given the information that you'd have put on your application form. And I'm looking down, and we will put in the wards, if you can see that. So if it's more than one ward, we will actually put in the amount of wards that you've applied for. And then we will do the sum of money in words and also in figures. So there's no misunderstanding regarding that. If we do know the name of the activity, we actually put that in the box, and it's also aids and helps the legacy team when they're trying to draw up a program, and we'll talk about where the information goes later on. The theme areas, again, based on what you've put on your application form or your proposal form, we'll try and insert that. If it isn't there, if I've sent some out and that is blank, I could ask if you could fill that in for me, because that would help me. As I said, I wouldn't have been able to pick that up from your application form. Ward priorities, again, picking up some of the information that you would have picked up from ward plans and or what's on your application form. As officers, will try and insert as much information there as possible as it fits to the ward. Grant commencing with all the CCF, they actually will start as soon as we get the approval from our external panel, and those that I've done this week would have said April 2022. All grants will expire on the 31st of August, because that's where our funding part finishes really from the legacy team. Now, I think someone put something in the chat about a vendor number. I will talk to you a little bit more about the vendor when we talk about a new supplier form, Margaret, because I think I sent you a vendor form as well. Right, I think yes, on the overview, the amount, my details or Carla's details or one of my colleagues will fill that in terms of who you can contact. Just to say that we're here to help and not to hinder. So if there are any questions pertaining to your conditions of grant aid, feel free and please do contact the project officer. In this case, it'll be myself for Ladywood constituency, but I'm happy to answer questions from any other constituency, as I've been doing this for a number of years. And if some of you are on the call, remember Local Innovation Fund or Neighbourhood Renewal Fund, you know, it's something that we've done years on. Project description, self-explanatory. Talk about your project, what you've put on your application form, just in quick terms, bullet points. Okay, sorry, Carla, you moved so quickly. You want to go back one? That, right. Thanks, Carla. Right, on the conditions of grant aid, there will be some budget information. And again, I've left that blank, or my colleagues will leave that blank where possible, because the budget information is how you filled in your application form and said how you are intending to spend the grant or the funding that you receive. Now that might change because you've either had more or less. It's very few projects that have had more money than they've asked for, but if it's less for those of you, it's to actually reassess that and look at, you know, if you've got funding coming elsewhere or people putting things in kind, is to fill that budget information sheet also. Supporting documents. Now this is a big one, and I'm not looking at my screen because Carla's sharing in a moment. But the the supporting documents will include and must include, when you're returning your COGA, your bank details or your organisation bank details. We will not issue funding to an individual. So if you haven't an organisation bank account, again, please let us know, because we can try and work with yourself and neighbouring groups to receive the funding on your behalf. It's important that you provide the documents that are ticked or in the box that are X. And for those that I've sent out in the last couple of days, I'll be looking for bank statements, bank account details, name of the organisation. Insurance is important. If you're doing an event that is external, outside, parks, it's about what procedures, what have you got in place in terms of policy for health and safety or risk assessment. If the information isn't sent back, we will come back and ask for more information regarding that. On the form, there is some monitoring details as well. Carla's moving really fast.
Sorry, I keep pressing the wrong button. Apologies. It's not letting me go back onto the screen.
Okay, so I think the slide says supporting documents, details of your activity, and monitoring and evaluation. Again, most of you will have put there would have been a question in your application form that asks, how will you know that it's success? If you're saying we're targeting 100 families or 100 individuals, that will form part of your monitoring and also your evaluation. I think Carla and I will talk later on about how monitoring and evaluation can be presented. You can go to the next slide now, Carla, thanks. Okay, second, contacts. There will be some information that I'm repeating probably what I've already said, and I've jumped the gun a bit, but we do need signatories, second, and witness, preferably not family members, and it's not typed. If we can get some signed documents, you can scan that and attach that to your conditions of grant aid. Okay, milestones we'll talk about a little bit later. Those of you who have had a form, by all means, when we go to the Q&A, can ask more specific questions. Carla, next slide, thanks. Right, so I'm covering what I've already said, jumped the gun a bit, but the type of activity, just to reiterate, the documents that are ticked in the box, which is your insurance and health and safety. And also we may ask for additional information. Now, if you are doing a street party, you will need to apply to your local district engineer, and they will either give you the permission or they will send you an email to say, yes, that's fine. We would also need to have that attached to your COGA, so we know that you've not just decided all of a sudden to put 2 bollards at the end of a road, and then we have the police and other residents saying, we didn't know that this road was going to be closed, etc., etc., etc. So we may ask for additional information about relevant permission. If it's not BCC land, it might be somebody else's land. It's just to make sure that, you know, who needs to be informed and be engaged with in terms of landowners are fully aware. If you don't have all the relevant documentation that are ticked on the box, again, please contact the project officer or the officer who sent you the conditions of grant aid. Referees, self-explanatory, give details of two persons who can comment on your track records and the delivery of the type of activity. Referees should not have any conflict of interest. Again, it's quite a, you know, receive payment from the organisation. Then there's a declaration. Signatories should be members of your organisation or management committee. And if you are signing on behalf of an unincorporated association, please be aware that all signatories will be personally responsible for the organisation's obligation under these conditions. So it's kind of like, be careful.
Yeah, and I'd just add that it does look slightly different on each of the forms. So if you've got a under £2,000 conditions of grant aid, it does ask you for 2 signatories and 2 witnesses, and then for the over 2K, it does ask you for 1 signatory and 1 witness. I think it is at the moment, and I think that's just because of when we've amended them. But what I would say is that if you do have any issues with filling it in, then again, get in contact with us, because I know that for some people it's quite difficult at the moment to get the wet signatories and get them sent over to us. So if that is going to present an issue to you, then get in touch with us and we can talk about whether we can do any other options. I think for a recent grant programme that we did, I was able to get the management committee members to email me with confirmation, so we could do it that way. So please let us know if there are any challenges that you experience with getting the forms signed.
Nadeem, I've seen your question in the chat. I'll answer that later if that's okay. And also the same with Margaret. Is a vendor number a 10-digit number it is. It normally starts with 1,000, I think, and then there are 6 numbers after that.
Brilliant. So we'll just carry on over to the new vendor form. If you are a new vendor to so I should say it's called vendor, but what it really is if you're registered on our grant management system to be able to process payments. So what we're doing is we send out the information to register you as a new organisation on our payment system. So if you haven't received a grant in the last 12 months or any of your details will have changed between the last time you've received a grant and now, then I would suggest you fill in this form. All new organisations would also need to fill this in as well. So it is always attached to your email with the conditions of grant aid, and there are only some sections that you need to complete. So I know that when you look at the form, it can be quite complicated because it's asking for different bits of information, and this is because all kind of organisations and groups or companies that are providing services or receive payments from Birmingham City Council use the same form to register onto our system. So that's why it asks for some information that you might not need to fill in. So on here, what we've done is just try to list the sections that will need to be filled in by organisations. So what we're asking for is in sections 1 to 5, that's mainly the contact details. So it asks you for your organisation's contact details and address. And then between sections 12 and 14 on the form, it asks you to just give us details of the type of organisation and whether you're classed as being a small organisation. And I would suggest that the majority of organisations and groups that have applied to the Celebrating Communities funding would fit under that banner. And then we ask you to provide the bank details, really. So what we need to do is check and we do ask for bank details, even if you are somebody that has already received funds from us, and that's so that we can check them before we send out a payment, because sometimes organisations may have changed their bank details, or we may have it down incorrectly. So we like to check that at every time that we release a grant. So we will ask for confirmation on the new vendor form or the supplier form, and we'll ask you to send that back in with the conditions of grant aid as well. Okay, so just the final things to remember before we go into any kind of questions that you may have. So remember to get the COGA signed. We get lots of them sent back to us where they've been completed but they haven't been signed. You can send us a photo of the signed COGA, or you can scan it and send that back to us. Remember to send back your supporting information. We get a lot of COGAs that come back to us and they don't have the supporting information, and that means that we can't progress the payment until we've got all of those. And then again, as I've just said, and I'll keep saying it, just send back your bank details. I think I recently did a small grants program, and I'd say 2/3 of the groups that came back to us with the COGA still didn't send their bank details, and that means that we then have to come back to you, which just takes a bit longer to get payments released. So I think my final things are really is talk to us. We are able to help in various different ways. So if you are unsure of anything, you can get in contact with the officer that has sent the COGA to you, or you can email the NDSU mailbox and someone will pick that up. And then just one more point that I did want to just raise, and I think I can come off the I will come off the sharing this at the moment, because I think that would be easier if I do that and then stop sharing. What I was going to just say is that at the moment we're transferring over to a new finance system, so that does mean that it's closed at the moment for us internally, and will open back between I think it's around mid-April that it comes back online. It is a new system, so it's going to take us a few days to get our head around it. So it was just really to let you know that payments won't be going out until, I would say, late April, early May time. So it's just to be mindful of that in your kind of planning, really, for when you expect to receive the funds. So I think at the moment you probably will have been given a couple of weeks to fill in the COGA, and if that comes back to us mid-April, we'll then start to process payments once the new finance system is set up. So I think that's all from myself and Pat at the moment. I don't know if Pat, you wanted to add anything in.
No, I think you've just covered that. I had made a note about the change of bank details. If you're a vendor and you change your bank details again within the last month or 12 months, we do need to have that in writing, because again, that could delay payments. So if there's any change or change of addresses due to management committees either stepping down or forming a new management committee, but you're still keeping the name, we would like to know who is on as a treasurer or treasurer, and the change of addresses. And it has been known that we've sent money to organisations which have folded, or the person's no longer in Birmingham, and it's taken a while just to retrieve that. So the more information we have at the beginning, the easier it is for us to ensure that you get your funds as quickly as possible. There's a couple of questions in the chat.